In the autumn of 1897, a man named Alistair Penhelagan climbed the spiral stairs of a lighthouse on the rugged coast of Cornwall. He carried a leather folio, brass calipers, and an inspection ledger that had been in continuous use since 1851. He was 61 years old and had inspected over 400 lighthouses across the British Empire during his long career. On that gray October morning, he became the last official inspector to see the original lighthouse mechanism before it was sealed, replaced, and quietly written out of every maritime record in the country. His final report still exists. It is 14 pages long. The first 13 pages are completely routine. The 14th page is blank except for a single handwritten line at the very bottom, written in faded sepia ink. "I will not sign what I cannot understand." That single sentence ended his career. Within 6 weeks, Penhelagan was dismissed, his pension was revoked, and his name was struck from the Trinity House records. He died in poverty in 1903. The mechanism he refused to certify vanished, replaced overnight by a standard Fresnel lens system that remains there today. But what was originally inside that lighthouse, what Penhelagan saw, and what generations of keepers had quietly maintained for nearly a century, is something that does not appear in any official engineering history of the 19th century. According to the records we are allowed to see, it should not have existed at all. To understand why Penhelagan's refusal mattered, you need to understand who he was. Alistair Penhelagan was not a romantic or a mystic. He was a practical Cornish engineer trained at the Royal School of Mines, fluent in 3 languages, and known among his colleagues for almost obsessive precision. His surviving ledgers are filled with measurements taken to the thousandth of an inch. He sketched every component he inspected, noted the alloy composition of every metal fixture, and once spent 3 days documenting the gear ratios of a clockwork mechanism just because the numbers did not match the manufacturer's documentation. He was the worst possible person to lie to, and the people who sent him to that Cornish lighthouse should have known that. The lighthouse itself sat on a granite outcrop called Kvellan, 3 miles north of a fishing village whose name has been changed on modern maps. Local records from the early 1800s describe the structure as already operational and lit. The earliest written reference to it appears in a 1741 customs document which describes it as ancient even then. There is no construction record, no architect, and no commissioning document. The Trinity House archives contain only a single entry for Kvellan, dated 1832, which simply reads, "Inherited structure, origin uncertain, maintenance ongoing." That phrase, "inherited structure," appears nowhere else in their entire catalog. Penhelagan arrived at the lighthouse on October 12th. The keeper at the time was Thomas Trev, the 3rd generation of his family to tend the light. Trev had been instructed to assist the inspection, but to remain in the lower chamber. He was strictly forbidden from entering the lantern room. Penhelagan found this restriction unusual, but climbed the stairs alone. What he encountered at the top is what we now reconstruct from his ledger, his letters to his sister Margaret, and a brief account given decades later by the keeper's grandson. The light source was not a flame. According to Penhelagan's measurements, the lantern room contained no oil reservoir, no gas line, no wick, and no combustion residue of any kind. The walls were spotless. There was no soot or glass haze from accumulated burning. The interior of the lantern room, he wrote, appeared to have never witnessed fire, yet the light was fully operational, sweeping the harbor every 9 seconds with metronomic accuracy. In the center of the room stood the mechanism. Penhelagan's drawings show a tapered cylindrical column, approximately 5 feet tall and 14 inches in diameter at its base. The material resembled neither bronze nor iron, nor any alloy he could identify. When he scraped a small sample with his calipers, expecting to leave a mark, the calipers themselves were damaged while the column remained unmarked. Around the column, set into the floor in a perfect ring, were 12 smaller cylinders. Each was connected to the central column by a copper-colored filament. These filaments were not insulated wires in any 19th-century sense. They glowed faintly even in daylight with a pale violet tint. He took measurements for nearly 6 hours. The central column had no moving parts, no gears, and no apparent power source, yet the beam kept rotating. By his own account written that evening to his sister, Margaret, he stated that he had spent 30 years inspecting the works of men, but that day he had inspected something that was not built by men, or if it was built by men who knew things the modern world had completely forgotten. The next morning, Penhelagan descended the lighthouse and found 3 men waiting for him at the base of the tower. They were not from Trinity House or any agency he recognized. One of them carried a leather case containing pre-prepared certification documents stating that the lighthouse conformed to standard Fresnel optical specifications. He refused to sign. What followed was a swift ruin. The men returned to London ahead of him. By the time he reached his office, his ledger was reviewed, his sketches photographed, and his employment placed under review. He was ordered to submit a corrected version of the report, and when he refused, he was dismissed without a pension under accusations of professional misconduct and fabricating records. His accusers claimed the mechanism never existed. But if the drawings were fabrications, why did 3 independent witnesses, all unrelated to Penhelagan, describe the exact same mechanism in writing over the next few years? A Cornish customs officer named Hargreaves wrote in his journal in 1998 that he had climbed Kvellan and seen a column of strange metal with 12 attendants set in a ring. A retired naval lieutenant named Boscawen wrote to the Royal Society in 1899 asking for an explanation of its operating principle, receiving no reply. Decades later, the keeper's grandson confirmed the family had been instructed never to discuss the unique column or its violet glow. By the spring of 1898, the mechanism was gone. A standard paraffin lamp and lens system was installed, leaving clean, unremarkable records with no mention of what was removed or where the original components went. This connects to a much larger global pattern. Across the late 19th century, from Russia to the United States, there was a quiet, coordinated effort to replace older, unexplained infrastructure under the guise of modernization. Inspectors who asked questions about the true origins of these pre-existing systems were systematically removed and their reports destroyed. In his final letter to his sister, written just days before his dismissal, Penhelagan shared his belief that the men who came to certify the light were not engineers but custodians of a program operating to systematically erase the past. Its purpose was to substitute things that worked by principles no one understood with basic, familiar technologies, effectively narrowing the world's technological imagination. He wrote that humanity was not advancing, but being made smaller, as the superior lights of their grandfathers were put out and replaced with standard candles called progress.